Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. This is Edward Ahmed Mitchell from the Council on American Islamic Relations, welcoming you to today's episode of CAIR on Air. Thank you so much for joining us. A special thank you to our listeners on American Muslim 360. As always, if you have any comments or questions during the program, you can put those in the comments section on Facebook. Inshallah, we'll keep track of that and try to respond if we can, inshallah. Today's program is, as you might have guessed, will be about what is happening right now in Palestine. As you all know, that in recent weeks, the Palestinian people, in particular in Jerusalem, have been protesting the Israeli government's plan to expel numerous families from their neighborhood in Sheikh Jarrah. The Palestinian people protesting that have been met with violence perpetrated by the Israeli government. And then to make matters worse, the Israeli government started attacking peaceful worshipers at Masjid al-Aqsa during these final days of Ramadan. And that escalated into recent days. And then I believe it was yesterday that Hamas started firing rockets into Israel. Israel then started firing missiles into Gaza, killing at last count, I think, 20 Palestinians, including 9 children. So the situation is spiraling out of control. As we know, this has been going on for decades. And these horrific violent flare-ups seem to happen, every few years. And so right now, all around the country and all around the world, people are asking, what can we do to help? To help in the violence, to help in the occupation, to help in the brutalization of innocent Palestinians. And today, inshallah, we're going to talk about what we as Americans and American Muslims can do right now to help. May not be a lot that we can do, but we can do something, inshallah. So we're going to bring on a special guest to discuss what we can do to help, inshallah. Let's bring on our special guest now from American Muslims for Palestine, our dear Brother Tahir. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, brother. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, I'm doing great, Brother Edward. I appreciate you guys giving us the time to talk about this issue. Apologize for being in my car as we are heading actually out to a protest right now here in Washington, D.C. At the State Department in order to protest and put pressure on the Biden administration to take matters seriously, to actually take into consideration finally for once an opportunity to condemn Israel, to rein in Israel as it brutally and violently attacks Palestinians worshiping in their holy spaces in the most holy of months, on the most holy of days. And this is just one small thing that the Biden administration can do. So barakallah fikum, I'm more than happy to answer questions and more than happy to indulge a little bit further as to what we can be doing.
Yeah. So Brother Tahir, so let's start. So there are two things I want to discuss. One is, American Muslims for Palestine, what's your position? What do you think our government should be doing? What are the demands? And I also want to talk about what are the opportunities people have to help, whether that's petitions, the protests. So you told us about the protests happening outside the State Department today at 4 o'clock in Washington, D.C., inshallah. So you're heading there right now. So if people want to join that protest, obviously wear a mask, social distance, but you can go 4 o'clock today, inshallah, outside the State Department. And what are the demands on the Biden administration? What exactly does AMP and the other civil rights groups and human rights groups, what do they want the Biden administration to do right now?
Yeah, right. Most immediately, we want the Biden administration to unequivocally condemn Israel's brutal assault on Palestinian worshippers in Masjid al-Aqsa. We want the Biden administration to demand that Israel cease all military operations on Gaza and to withdraw its troops and police forces from Masjid al-Aqsa so that Muslims can pray freely without having to deal with attacks. These are the basic things that we're demanding. We're also demanding, insofar as the communities in Sheikh Jarrah, that the United States government intervene to prevent the expulsion and ethnic cleansing of the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, which has been the focal point and the center of attention of our struggle over the past several weeks. As many of you have seen the videos of the families there being attacked by Israeli settlers and by Israeli forces who seek to expel them from their homes, which they've been living in for generations. So those are the basic four demands that we have in the immediate sense. And of course, the larger and more long-term demand is that the United States ultimately ends its support for Israel, ends U.S. aid and military aid, particularly for the state of Israel. This is something that we are pushing for, something that we advocate for on a regular, with or without these escalations that we are seeing today.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's tragic for all of us as Americans is we see what's happening on TV. An entire apartment building was just destroyed in Gaza. 9 children. I had to look at a video yesterday of a little boy covered in blood lying underneath what I assume was his father, also covered in blood, a man burned alive on a motorbike. And we see this, and we have to know that our tax dollars as Americans are going to pay for these bombs and these bullets that are being used to commit these war crimes. And so, in terms of the demand for the government to stop funding, this violence and to stop funding other human rights violators, it may seem like a pipe dream, right? We give so much money away to the Israeli government and to other human rights violators, but change starts with the demand, right? Change starts with the demand. There was a long time where people thought that the American government would never stop supporting the apartheid government in South Africa, right? Reagan was very resistant to standing up against them, but you made the demand, you fought for it, and eventually change came, thank God. So, Tahir, what can people do to help? Obviously, there's the protest. What else can they do? A petition to sign, other protests to attend around the country? What else can people do to help right now, especially
so
in the United States?
There's a petition circulating right now. We have more than 200,000 signatures. We actually just delivered the petition this morning at around noon to the State Department with more than 201,000 signatures from Americans from all over the United States. And we're actually asking for people to continue signing that petition to increase the amount of people. And maybe we can get it to 250, 300,000 people signing the petition so that we could increase the amount when we go back to the State Department again. That's number one. Number two is there are a bunch of actions happening across the country in the next few days. Some are happening today and throughout the week and into the weekend, protesting the situation in Jerusalem and particularly even commemorating the anniversary of a Nakba, which happens to fall on May 15 this year. So there are multiple actions. There's the online actions. There are the physical demonstrations that are taking place across the country. But also, I wanted to mention that there are other avenues for support. Number one is to follow AMP. As simple as that sounds, following us and amplifying us on social media is really critical for us to get the word out there. In the absence of mainstream news coverage that is favorable or even just impartial, social media has become really instrumental in allowing us to actually get the real information out there. And so following us on social media, increasing the amount of followers that we have really helps us amplify the voices of Palestinians who are suffering on the ground and who are trying to get the word out. So that's number one. Number two is the dissemination of information. We've done really good work over the past several weeks in disseminating information about the situation in Palestine. Share the stuff. The stuff is original content. We're putting in a lot of effort to make it. And so we hope that the community is benefiting from this knowledge that we're disseminating and that spreading it, and so that other people can learn as well. And then of course donate to AMP. We have our launch good and our website accepting donations. Right now is the time to do it. These last 2 days of Ramadan, as we benefit from the barakah of these last 2 nights, that we ask the community to really step up and put their money where their mouth is. The change for Palestine isn't going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen because of our protests today, but it is going to happen over time. And with the only organization that is doing this work for the longevity of it is AMP. We're exclusively focused on this subject of Palestine and Palestinian human rights, and we are working with members of Congress. As a matter of fact, we have 2 members of Congress joining us today at the rally in front of the State Department, Congressman Andre Carson and Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. So we are doing our part to bring Palestine to the halls of power. As a matter of fact, the other action item that we have is for our community to push the recent letter that was introduced by Marie Newman. It's a dear colleague letter that the freshman congresswoman from Chicago wrote and put out, published today, and is getting some support from members of Congress from across, well, I shouldn't say across the party line, but across the Democratic Party, at least for now. And we're asking the community to call their members of Congress to get them to sign on to the letter that Marie Newman has issued and published, and it's specifically geared towards and targeting the State Department so that they can forcefully take action into holding Israel accountable. The State Department does have leverage here. The State Department does have leverage. For those of you who don't know, the State Department can and should actually call out Israel for its human rights abuses, but also the State Department has the ability to withhold some of the money, that the aid money that is being used, that the United States gives to Israel, that is being used currently to oppress Palestinians. In the previous administration, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, actually undermined the State Department openly, and allowing Israel to keep money that was supposed to be returned to the United States. So we've had some change in policy, somewhat, but the Biden administration thus far has not gone far from the Trump administration's policy of carte blanche support for Israel. As a matter of fact, you know, if some of you watched that video yesterday of the State Department spokesperson, Ned Price, you know, basically twisting and turning,
trying desperately to avoid saying
deny Palestinians the ability.
Matters. Right, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry?
I said it seemed like he was trying desperately to avoid explicitly saying that Palestinian life matters, right? That the deaths of 9 children.
It was ridiculous. I mean, he was going above and beyond to not condemn Israel, to not condemn the killing of Palestinian children, to not acknowledge that Palestinians have a right to self-defense as much as Israel does. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, it really, this Biden administration, which came into office promising a turn of the pages, promising a new era of American foreign policy, has essentially stuck to the same old tragic language that ends up causing more suffering for the Palestinian people, and ends up giving Israel every carte blanche support to do what is necessary. And this is what we are demanding, that the United States remove this pledge that they have given Israel, that they will not condemn Israel. This is something that makes no sense. The United States is in a position, as a matter of fact, the strongest position to hold Israel accountable, as the United States is the main benefactor of the state of Israel. So this is something that we all know is common knowledge. But in order for us to achieve those gains politically, we do need to do work. We do need to support organizations that are doing this work in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so important, as you said, Tar, to support the people who are experts in the subject, exclusively focused on the subject, and that's why CAIR is happy to support and work with you all on these issues to advance justice for Palestinians and all people around the world. So Tahir, so, you know, as you've noted, the Biden administration's response so far has been typical, lackluster, depressing. And what's so amazing to me about both their response and the media's response is that for days now, Palestinians at Masjid al-Aqsa have been attacked with rubber bullets, stun grenades, batons, while praying, right? We've seen video of people peacefully praying, not even protesting, just standing there praying, and having explosive devices thrown at them by Israeli soldiers, women being attacked, brutalized. This has been going on for days, not to mention the expulsion of people
for weeks, since the beginning of Ramadan.
Right.
The Israelis put barricades.
Everyone's very quiet about it, right?
The
come out are very vague, both sides this, both sides that. But now, the moment you've got, rockets being fired, all of a sudden, now we want to take it seriously. But what if you had taken this seriously from the start to try to avoid this thing escalating into this tit-for-tat violence we're now trapped in? And so it's I can only hope that the Biden administration now recognizes that it needs to intervene now, and it should have intervened earlier to stop this violence before it started escalating to the point where it's gotten now, where you've got 9 children who are dead, and missiles and rockets flying back and forth. It's insane. And all this because you don't want to publicly criticize a foreign government that is violating international law and violating our own norms. So I digress. Anyway, Tahir, so you're heading to the protests now. It's at 4 o'clock. We've got protests happening around the country, and people can sign the petition. They can follow AMP. It's at AM Palestine on Twitter to keep track of what's happening, inshallah. And then also, I think another important thing is to make sure, Tahar, I don't know if you're making an effort on this, to make sure the media, mainstream media, is really changing the way it reports on this. I watched a report from ABC News last night that was remarkable in its bias. I mean, the issues at Masjid al-Aqsa with Sheikh Jarrah were footnotes, and the focus was almost as if you thought that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Hamas and Israel started exchanging fire,
right,
and nothing had happened beforehand. It was so blatantly slanted and biased as almost to be funny. So I don't know if there's anything we can do to try to, shake media outlets out of this this apathy, this remarkable deference and whitewashing of what's really happening on the ground. Anything we can do there?
Yeah, I mean, there is. I've seen multiple efforts with various organizations. Some have met with the editorial boards of these news organizations to no avail, because clearly they want to spin everything in Israel's favor, and this is the unfortunate reality that we're dealing with. I think it's important to call these organizations out. I think it's important that major social media influencers, celebrities are coming out in support of the Palestinian people, coming out in support of Sheikh Jarrah. I've seen, I mean, the lady from from Game of Thrones, the lady who director of Terminator, I think, came out and I mean, so there's some movement there on a grassroots level of people really amplifying the voices of Palestinians, putting the information that's out there that's true, despite the media's attempts to whitewash Israel's crimes. I think that's a very important thing for us to do, and that's one of the things that we need to really be focusing on when we see somebody posting, when we see some people, celebrities or major influencers, talking about Palestine. Even like the Weeknd the other day, I think yesterday, posted about Palestine. Those are, it's important to amplify and make sure that they feel supported, because it's not an easy thing to do when you have such a big platform to talk about Israel and Palestine. But we're seeing that happening more and more. And I'll tell you this, Brother Edward, this shift that we're seeing in public opinion is happening despite the media. We're seeing a major shift in public opinion, and all the polls indicate that. I mean, look at the Brookings polls. You look at the Pew Research polls that have been happening over the past 2 years. American public opinion is shifting against Israel, despite the fact that Israel spends a lot of money on propaganda in the United States, and that ultimately is what will lead to the policy change. Politicians are not leading the effort here. They're following the lead of the grassroots. They're following the lead of the constituent base that is shifting on this issue, and we're seeing this happening across the country. With the victory of Congresswoman Marie Newman, for example. You had a man named Dan Lipinski, who was 20-year incumbent in that district. Nobody thought he would lose, but this man was in a district full of Palestinians. This man was in a district full of a Palestinian community that was politically and organized and mobilized, and he refused to acknowledge the Palestinian community. As a matter of fact, was a staunch supporter of the state of Israel, and he lost his election. He lost the primary to Congresswoman Marie Newman. Now she's the one who is leading the charge in Congress to condemn Israel's crimes, and is leading this dear colleague letter. So that shows you that the political mobilization and organization of organizations like AMP and others, honestly, it's not just us. There's so many people out there working. This is what will lead to the change that we desire. And this is what I want to encourage people, that in this moment of difficulty, in this moment of trial and tribulation, that we look to mobilize our community on the ground, but also to organize our community. It's not just about mobilization. It's about organizing to build our power so that we can affect change, so that we can get the change that we desire. It's not about, just standing on the street. No, it's about mobilizing our people so that we can strategically use that mobilization in order to build our power. And inshallah, this is what we're trying to do as an organization. And this is why we appreciate what CAIR is doing and giving us their platform as well, and collaborating with us. And inshallah, this is the end result that we're looking for.
Inshallah. At some point, I mean, people, this has been said to me, sadly, I've heard this within the Muslim community, that Muslim Americans focus too much on the issue of Palestine. And, to me, that's nonsense for a few reasons. One, we are Americans, right? Our government is bankrolling these injustices. So
absolutely,
even if we weren't Muslim, we as Americans have an obligation to speak up about how our tax dollars are being misused to occupy and oppress people. And yes, as Muslims, we care about our brothers and sisters around the world, just like the Jewish community and the Christian community cares about their fellow believers. Nothing wrong with that. And then as people who support basic human rights, right? Put aside being American, put aside being Muslim, just a supporter of human rights. How can you watch children being bombed by a government that has some of the most sophisticated military targeting technology in the world, and yet somehow they can't seem to avoid killing dozens and dozens and thousands of civilians, including many children, every time something like this happens? How can we not speak up about this? Not to mention the ethnic cleansing, the expulsions, and all that's going on. So look, this is something, whether you're an American, whether you're a Muslim, or simply a human rights activist, that has to matter to all of us, and no, especially to our government.
This is a very good point.
Talks about the importance of human rights, right? When it comes to our enemies overseas, with countries they don't like. You don't believe in human rights if you only demand human rights from your opponents. You have to demand it from your so-called friends, and that includes, the Israeli government. So we hope the Biden administration will listen to the protesters today outside the State Department and intervene before this situation gets worse. And by the way, it's not enough to go back to the status quo. The status quo just perpetuates this over and over again. You've got to address the root problem, which is ending the occupation of the Palestinian people, ending the oppression. And then you can have peace. You can have justice and peace, inshallah. But otherwise, you're just putting a Band-Aid on a giant wound, and that's not going to solve anything in the long term.
Exactly. And honestly, the point you brought up about the Muslim communities, some people making that statement about, why Palestine, why the focus on Palestine. I mean, look, no other country in the world has a quote unquote special relationship with the United States like Israel does. No other country, there's no other people in the world who are so vilified and demonized by the U.S. government as Palestinians. I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves. When the Uyghur crisis is, as the Uyghur crisis is happening in China, immediately the United States government took action, placed sanctions on certain individuals, considered the genocide of Uyghurs as a genocide. I mean, these are things that are happening. Same thing with the Rohingya Muslims. Same thing with the crisis in Kashmir. I mean, it's easy. Those are easy foreign policy topics to go in and talk to members of Congress on, and even on the Republican side as well. When it comes to Palestine, all of a sudden it becomes a red line for many U.S. politicians, and that's why it's imperative on us to understand the delicacies of this issue and the nuances of it, and so that we could actually achieve the change that we require. This is something that is inherently tied to U.S. foreign policy. It's inherently tied to America's imperial interests around the globe. I mean, so when we're talking about challenging the occupation, we're essentially talking about shaking the structure of American foreign policy. This is not an easy task to do. And so, it's important for us to kind of understand that and really think in the broader sense of things. Think bigger than maybe the some of the arguments that have been made, unfortunately. And this is all these things are besides the fact that we're talking about Al-Quds here. We're talking about Al-Aqsa here. We're talking about one of the holiest places on earth. We're talking about the first Qibla for Muslims. We're talking about the third holiest site for Muslims. Masra Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you're talking about something that has religious and political significance, and no other cause in the world can bring those two together, right? The same way that the Palestine does. And I mean, and this is not to privilege Palestine or
you can address all these issues at the same time, right? But it seems like there's people don't mind if we talk more about certain issues. They just don't want us to talk more about this issue. You can address the Uyghurs and Myanmar, and we must all that, and we do, right? But
yeah, absolutely, and that's something we work on too as AMP, by the way.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So Tara, look, I'm going to let you go shortly so you can get to the protest, inshallah. But I want you to know that the Muslim community stands with you in standing up against this injustice. I think many Americans who are not Muslim do as well. And by the way, many African Americans do as well, because I, as a black man, can recognize the obvious similarities between what the Israeli government is perpetrating against Palestinians and what black people went through in South Africa and went through with the Jim Crow South. And so, we, again, whether you're black, Muslim, American, human rights activist, whatever lens you're using to look at this situation, it matters to you. So Tahir, we thank you for the work, and inshallah, we look forward to helping you to advocate for justice for all people, including the Palestinians.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining today's program. We're going to end a little early, inshallah. For those of you heading to the protest at the State Department, be safe, wear a mask, maintain social distance, inshallah. Be careful and be safe. We got a lot of crazy people around. An anti-Muslim extremist just targeted a mosque in Virginia the other day. So just be careful, inshallah, and peacefully make your voices heard. And hopefully, inshallah, our government will listen and do the right thing and help to bring both this violence to an end and also the occupation of the Palestinian people to an end. And finally, of course, we encourage you to support AMP as well as CAIR and all the great organizations doing important work around the country, inshallah, during these final days of Ramadan. Your donations are so important to us. You can also sign various petitions that are going around. AMP's got their petition you can find online. I think we can also try to put that in the comments section on Facebook. And check your local community listings, so to speak, to see what demonstrations are scheduled for this weekend in your area, inshallah. Thank you all so much for joining. We look forward to speaking to you again next week, inshallah. We won't have the program on Thursday due to the holiday, so we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 3 p.m., inshallah. And we're also going to try to live stream today's protest at 4, so you should be able to come back at 4 o'clock to watch that live, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you.